Hello everybody, Thomas Fleming here. Well, I'm going to take a quick pander down here. There we go, see there's a gator as I'm walking to my path. Wanted to make sure you saw how close I am. There's a lot more gators in the swamp than here. This is just the visitor center, but okay, for my topic today, God has given me an interesting one. And there's a lot of people here in the park, so I may have to break this up or see how well I can do. I've had a number of careers in my life, from the military to aerospace and computers, but the last few years, Hollywood moved to Georgia, and I was able to play a little part in that. I didn't want to get involved from the professional point of view, because I don't do things by the rules. I do things by what's the right thing to do at the right time. And sometimes those that follow the rules, I'm talking about unions, you can't do the right thing. So, in any case, not getting into the union limited what I could do. So I worked a lot in independent films. I've produced over 100 independent films. I've acted in a few. I've directed a couple. I've written a couple. I've pretty much done everything. I've worked camera. That was the last thing I did on set, was to work camera on an independent film, and worked as the director of photography. Okay, so that's the theme. We're going to make a movie. It's called God's Plan for Humanity. Don't worry, everybody's got a part. You can either be a principal actor, or you can be a extra, you could be a stand-in, you can be a photo double. They need people to shine the light on various individuals and things that are going on, so you can work in lighting. The hierarchy of a film, if you don't know much about that, watch the credit roll at the end of any of your favorite movies, and you see what all these people do. They're all there to help make the film. They've each got a job. It's an important job. You can always argue that you can't make the film without any particular individual, but sometimes you can use somebody else if you need to. For instance, if you got a leading star who can't be in the film that you want to do, you grab another leading star, or someone who at least has the ability to carry the film. You need producers at the top. Well, that's the main producer, the executive producer for this film is God. But there are other producers. You could have a second executive producer, Jesus, and the spirits. You could have three. You've got line producers who are making sure that all the paperwork is done right. You can have associate producers, who's basically somebody that comes in to help, and you just give them a title of associate producer so they can be in the credits. I've been directed by many of the big names. My favorite director is Clint Eastwood. He has a nice laid-back way of directing. You know, in a normal production, you got people out there yelling all the time. Rolling, camera, action. All these different things that they say, and they're yelling at it so that everybody on the set can hear it. Clint Eastwood has a nice calm voice when he's directing. He's not yelling. He doesn't want anybody else to yell either. And you come up to the actor and, "You ready?" He says, "Okay, go ahead." That's it. Not "go ahead and make my day." That's his Dirty Harry role. I was standing next to him on set one time. He was directing, and I wasn't on the camera at that time. I was just an extra. But I've talked to him a number of times, so he knows me, and we can chat a little bit on set. And his director of photography comes over and says, "We can't get your last shot in the way you wanted it because the sun's going down, and we're not going to be able to do it today." And Clint Eastwood turns to him and goes, "Well, a man's got to know his limitations." In his typical acting voice that he had. And we all laughed at that. So that's a good thing to know. You've got to know your limitations. As humans, we have very many limitations, but with God, we don't have any. So you got to figure out who you're working for, who you're performing for. Okay, I don't know if I can sit down any place. There's a nice little area to sit down in, but it's been raining. Let me try. And I'm in my my khaki pants, so I don't want to sit down on anything that will leave a mark. All right. So in any case, when you're doing all this, when you're planning all this, you've got people that sit down and do all this paperwork to get things set up. You've got people that have to figure out who the actors are going to be for the storyline. You've got to find a script first. Well, we've got the script. God wrote it. We've got it basically in individual stories in the Bible. We're not going to act out the whole thing. That would take too long. People wouldn't listen. They don't listen now. So we're just going to act out parts of it. So I think we can't get Charlton Heston anymore, so we're going to have to get somebody to play the lead of Moses. And I don't know that I can do that either, so we may have to find somebody else. He started off doing small parts and just kept working. At one point in time, the early actors were under contract to studios, and they were told you have to be available to make, 4 or 5 movies a year, things like that. And it didn't matter whether they liked them or not. They were captive. They were slaves to the studios, and they didn't like it. So that's why a lot of the early actors don't get along well in that environment. And sometimes people meet them and they're not very friendly. But nowadays, everybody's pretty much freelance with agents that can help them out and managers. So it's a more pleasant environment. But you've got to realize, actors are not. They're characters. They're actors. And we have a lot of characters out there playing different roles. The Antichrist is out there. He's acting. He's going to act out his script. God's going to provide cover for the rest of us. Exit stage left when it's our turn. The budget is pretty much unlimited, so we don't have to worry about that. God's resources. We have to worry about everybody getting food. Catering has to work. We have to be able to eat good and healthy food. Most of the sets I was on had good food, but there's a couple of them that didn't. There's a trail going back in there, and I probably shouldn't take that, so I'm not. We're in alligator territory, so staying on the path would be the good thing. And they have all these raised walkways like I'm on. As long as I'm on these raised areas, the alligators would find it difficult to move. So anyhow, there is a premiere. We're going to get to view this video with Jesus at the Bema seat. Some are going to get to view their parts at the great white throne. Yeah, I'm tying everything into that, aren't I? There will be awards. There's an award ceremony. We get crowns. Everybody gets one crown. Some people might get others, depending on what you've been able to do down here with what you've got. Some are going to get the hook, pull you off the stage. If you've ever been to theater, sometimes they'd have to use that on a person who wouldn't stop performing on the stage. That's an old vaudeville thing. People get up there with sometimes limited talent and they got to pull them off the stage. So they had a hook. I don't hear anybody around me, so I think I'm going to stop right here. If I go too much farther, I'll get back into civilization. The bottom line is, nobody doing any of these jobs did so the very first thing they went out to do. You had to learn. Lucas and Spielberg had smaller jobs. A lot of these guys would just take their home film cameras and go out in their yards and film something. You've got to have a vision for this. Be able to see what you're going to do in your head before you do it, and that way you can plan for it. There's paperwork. There's shots and paperwork where you've got to sit down and figure out what all the camera shots are going to be for this scene. So the camera department knows what cameras to have, who to have there, and all these things. There's a lot of planning involved. Well, God's doing all the planning, so you don't have to worry about that. You just got to have people available and the equipment available. Lighting is crucial. Earlier cameras were more crucial for lighting than the modern ones. I'm just using my phone to film, and it films better than cameras all the way up through the 60s and 70s, until they started going digital. And there was a pushback on digital. The traditionalists didn't want to go that way. There's a pushback on various religions. There's always been a pushback on prophetic teachings, I guess would be an easier way to state this. People say, I don't believe any of this stuff. It's been there for years. God hasn't come back. Don't teach me any of this prophetic stuff. Well, they're right to a degree, but they're wrong in the fact that they don't know that before Israel became a nation, revelation was not important. But after that, we can see that it is important. It's part of the whole scheme. But Israel wasn't complete when it started in 1948. It wasn't until 1967 that they had the location for the temple. There are location scouts that work in films. They go out and look for places that have interesting characteristics. We need a courthouse or we need something else to do things with. I'm turning around because I hear people coming. I can't get people on the camera, so that's the thing that I learned in film. If you get somebody's face on here and you're making any kind of money, they can sue you. They're charging for their likeness. When I was doing films, we had to keep paperwork with us in a folder that people had to sign saying it's okay to use their likeness. Otherwise, you could completely block a film coming out if you don't get the paperwork right. So there's paperwork people who, that's their job, to make sure everything's signed correctly. Salaries have to be adjusted based on how good the agents are nowadays and how good in demand the actor is. The actor may have been in demand at one time, but he may not be now. People like Moses, who was pretty high and mighty at one point in time, then he kills the Egyptian and he had to run. when he came back, he had lost a lot of it. It took him a long time to come back. So he didn't come back in his high and mighty position again, but he had access to the Pharaoh because they knew who he was. Of course, God is in charge of special effects. That's something that we get to see in movies a lot, especially if you like to watch Marvel films that I've worked in a number of them. You can see me on camera in the last Avenger movie, Endgame. I'm just an extra, but a featured one. I get to be seen doing something, so that was cool. Get to meet Michael Douglas there and Chris Captain America. But again, these are actors. They are not the superheroes that they portray. Robert Downey is not the superhero that he portrays, and he's had a bad history. Nobody wanted to really do anything with him, and they gave him a shot, they gave him a chance in what appeared to be a low-budget, not very good original Iron Man movie. They gave the job for the directing to Jon Favreau because he'd only directed independent films, and they didn't want to risk it on a good director. You don't know when you're making a film how big it's going to be, how much of an impact it's going to be on people. Well, our little film we're working on, we know the impact. It's going to save the lives of anybody who sees it and accepts what they see. So we have to keep doing this. We're going through rehearsals. You have to practice. These people don't just show up on the day of filming and not pick up a script. There may be someone doing a cameo that might do that, but not a lead actor. You've got to memorize the script. You've got to practice what to say. You've got to say it with emphasis or with sorrow or whatever the script calls for and whatever the director asks for. You see how this stuff works? Everybody working together as a team. And if anybody spots something wrong, it's your job to point it out. We can't have ruined footage because you have an airplane flying through the scene in a Western. And there are those out there, you can find movies that have that. We saw the Starbucks coffee cup in Game of Thrones. Everybody's got a coffee cup all over the place. They got water bottles all over the place. You know, the clear plastic water bottles. People go through and have to pick all that stuff up because the people on set don't always do that, especially the actors. And the actors are kind of an elite group. I had a director come out one time and in a loud voice and in a commanding voice say, if I hear one cell phone come off, ring, or anything from them, I'm going to personally escort that person off the set and you never work on this set again. Okay. 5 minutes later, ring, it was a cell phone going off. Whose was it? The main actor. He looked up sheepishly, did something to it, put it back in his pocket, and the director just walked away. What can you do? But we're not like that. We are forgiven immediately if we take it to Christ. But if we disrupt something important, that's not good. Especially if we're trying to reach somebody. Okay. If you want to find me on IMDb, Internet Movie Database is what it stands for. Hang on. I can get the back of heads, I just can't get the front. But if you want to find me there, you can find me there. I'm under Larry Fleming. I think I have 180 credits, varying ones, but they're nothing major. God's let me play for a little bit. It allowed me to build up confidence being in front of people. And that was the key from it. I have no problem standing in front of a camera or a crowd or anything. I might be nervous, but the more prepared you are, the less nervous you are. And again, that applies to what we're doing here. If you practice what you need to practice, you won't be nervous about doing it. You might be nervous the first time. The second time, it'll be less. By the time you do something 20 or 30 times, you won't be nervous doing it. Now, maybe your performance is a command performance and you're going to do this before the king and queen or something. That might make you a little bit more nervous than normal, but if you know your craft, whether you're supposed to be preaching, teaching, or just playing a helper, if you're a nurse, a fireman, whatever your job is to help people, you're definitely needed in all these different tasks and applauded for taking on a service-oriented job. But you couldn't go out there and be a fireman the first day you showed up. You go to fire school, not learning how to create them necessarily, but learning how to put them out. But sometimes you got to know how to create them too. Even when I was in the Navy, I had to go to firefighter school because you needed to know how to put out a fire on a ship. Everybody had to know how to do that because that's a very dangerous thing. You've got closed compartments and smoke. You had to put on breathing apparatuses and know how to grab a hose and put the fire out. People have died on board ships because somebody couldn't put the fire out properly. You know, it depends on whether they get the ammo on fire or if it's on like an aircraft carrier, a lot of jet fuel. You got to know your job. But you get out there and you do it, and you get confident. Okay, this is going to be one of my moving day videos, so I'm going to keep this one short as well. I don't know, I think I have some footage I haven't shown you yet, but I'm going to have to look and see if I have or not. We're starting to see some of the alligators, but not as many. Till we meet in the clouds, God bless. Okay, let's just see what we got here. This swamp area has a whole bunch of plants that eat insects and other things. Bladderworts, that's kind of like a moss. You pick it up and you can hear it snap, crackle, pop in your ear as it's trying to close in on whatever else it might be able to eat. Interesting. Spanish moss everywhere. Dead trees everywhere. These raised platforms make it easy to get around, and we don't have to worry about alligators. Dead end, 2,100 feet, huh? Cut that in half because somebody lit the walkway on fire and they never rebuilt it. There's places for swampy water if they get enough rain. They actually need more rain in this area. We had some today, but it was not very much. A major front went through, and we're all panicking that we're going to get storm weather here, and it split. Half of it went across Florida, and the other half kind of scattered and came over us. So we got some rain, but not the amount they need. Just really interesting. They found stuff like this in Louisiana when they filmed the Bigfoot series there, and or the movie, whatever it was. I don't know why they associate this stuff with ghosts and all that stuff, but a lot of the movies do. Since we're on a movie theme, and a location scout would come out here for something like this. They have filmed here. I don't remember what, they said that they have. Georgia's full of interesting places. Hollywood, where you are used to seeing movies, they don't have interesting places. They have to create them. You know, for the Frankenstein movie, the set's there. For Annie Griffith, the set's there. In fact, some of the sets on Annie Griffith was used in one of the Star Trek episodes. You could see Floyd's barbershop in a Star Trek episode. That's pretty cool. All right. Traveling, so ask for travel mercies. We'll see you when I get to my next site. Well, let's go see if our mama gator's over here. Yep, there she is. She's in this little lagoon area where the boats come in. And she's hanging around because she's got 5 little gators somewhere that just gave birth a little while ago. So she's just keeping an eye on them. Somewhere in there is also a big gator, a male. Kind of hard to judge the size, but the lily pads are probably the size of my hand if I were to hold them out. Now there's a way to tell how big these gators are, and I forget what the actual rule is. You could go look it up. You're supposed to look from the nose to the head or to the eyes or something like that and multiply that by 10 or something. I'm not sure what the formula is, but there's a way. So between the tips of the nose that are sticking out there and the eye sockets, if you go in the middle, that's probably about a foot. The rest of the way back is another foot for the neck, and then the body starts. So it's bigger than what this camera is showing. She's used to people here all the time, so I doubt if we'll be able to see any of the little ones, but we can go look. I've been here before, you saw that. Nope, don't see any. But there's 5 little ones in here someplace. And she's just staying right there. Photography moment, huh? Okay, enjoy.